We've talked a lot about legal tax reduction for yourself and for your business here at Nomad Capitalist for years, so much so that some people think that's all I care about and it's what I base my entire life decisions on. Today, I'm going to set the record straight. Hi, I'm Andrew Henderson. This is Nomad Capitalist, where we help 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs and investors legally go where you're treated best. And Taco sent me a comment recently that stood out to her. I'm not going to share the particular comment because I think it speaks for a lot of comments that we've probably received over the years, which basically said, Andrew doesn't care about anything your country does. His only goal is to pay zero tax. Now, this was in the context of something that we talked about, I don't recall exactly, but it was in a country that I suppose was a Muslim country. And the idea was people were talking about, oh, Andrew doesn't care about Sharia law or this or that. And certainly, I would agree that I probably don't have some of the concerns that the average person living in the United States or some other Western country does with living in a Malaysia or a Dubai or what have you. And so if that means that I'm in favor of Sharia law, then I guess so be it. But the interesting part was that Andrew makes all of his decisions based on where he can pay low tax. And what might interest some of you is that actually, as we speak, over the last several months, I have been working on some personal lifestyle plans to actually increase my tax bill in order to spend some more time in a new country. And so what I think really, for me, go where you're treated best is about is how do you attain personal happiness? How do you attain personal fulfillment? Now, we don't talk about this all the time. I don't get too motivational that often because we are nomad capitalists. We're capitalists. And capitalist is in the name of the business. It's in the name of the channel. And for years, people have seen what I've done, and they've seen how I have dramatically lowered my taxes by moving into the United States, by living in different places, by being careful about how I spend my time, by using legal offshore structures. And people have asked, how can I do the same thing? Because I think that a lot of the marketplace out there, this is a really nasty business, the offshore business. There are people who are corner cutters. There are people who are outright frauds. There are people who have been in prison, who have been disbarred, who have been kicked out of countries. And some, I assume, are good people. And I think that one of the challenges that I saw when I got started in this was, sure, there's a lot of guys selling you companies, but they often tell lies of omission, like saying that, hey, this company in Panama has no taxes, but the fact that you live in Canada means that you're going to pay taxes in Canada, whether Panama or Nevis or Vanuatu taxes you or not. And so, people came to me over the years organically, and we built up a business helping people who ran businesses who believed they weren't getting a fair shake in their country. I never felt like I really belonged in the United States, and so there's probably there's no low tax rate you could offer me to get me to stay there. But by and large, most of the Americans who are leaving the United States over taxes, if you put in place a 15% rate, I bet a lot of them would stay. Even if they could live somewhere else and pay zero, they would stay. It's their home country. They'd gladly pay something. But what offends them is how egregious the taxes are, not only in countries like the US, but in many other countries around the world right now that are what we call legacy brands, and they're getting worse. And so, people have come to us, and that's what we talk about. We push the button. We play the hits, as they say, in the radio business. And so the happiness piece has perhaps gotten lost somewhat in translation, but I personally have enjoyed, over all these years, living around the world. I have personally enjoyed going from country to country. There was a time in my life a number of years ago where I thought, what would be great is spending 10 days in each place before you go into the next one, having 36 places a year. Maybe you recycle a couple of them. There was a time that was my goal. Not that long ago in my life. There was a time not that long ago in my life where my goal was to spend 250 nights a year in nice hotels. And I've learned the hard way by staying in corporate luxury hotels just how bad it is. And so now I've assembled a collection of homes around the world, which has somewhat slowed me down a little bit to where I at least spend a couple months in many of these different places. But my goal has been to find happiness. My goal in leaving the United States was to find places where perhaps I would find better friends who are more on my wavelength, find dates who are more like it. And, I've told you the stories in the past about how, I was standing at 24th Street in an Indian school in Phoenix, and a woman walked up to me. It's a little bit chilly one day, and I'm wearing a scarf. I didn't have the scarf game or the scarf collection I do now, but she walked up to me and used a homophobic slur to describe someone who would wear a scarf. Meanwhile, I would later travel throughout Europe, and I would have attractive women come up and say, "Ooh, I really love that scarf. What is that?" And so I was going where I was treated best. That's about happiness. That's what initially motivated me to leave the United States, was saying there has to be, it's worth exploring the world. I want to see my roots. One of my first trips was to Norway, where I have ancestry from. I spent a lot of time in Lithuania, where I also have ancestry. I just wanted to see the world. I didn't want to slow down. The fact that the taxes, there were some tax incentives that I mastered over the years, was icing on the cake in the very beginning. I was chasing happiness. But when you look at it from a tax perspective, certainly now I'm not going to say that taxes don't play some role in my life, but it doesn't play the entire role in my life, and I don't quite frankly think it plays a role in anyone's life. I think what most people are opposed to is ridiculously high taxes. People are opposed to a high burden of paperwork, and people are opposed to the toxicity of the culture. I can go back and live in the United States, and perhaps I could avail myself of numerous tax exclusions. I could do what Robert Kiyosaki, who spoke at Nomad Capitalist Live this year, does, and I could put my money all into real estate. I could do things like the opportunity zone, where I could put my money into failing and flailing areas and hope to get it back. But I much prefer, being able to do what I want to do and having a moderate level or zero taxation. Because quite frankly, if I went back to the United States today, the point I wanted to make was, even if I did a bunch of things to reduce my taxes, I would still be paying hundreds of times, at the very best case scenario, what the average American pays. And by the way, if you look at the numbers in 2020, 61% of Americans didn't even pay any federal income tax. They paid zero. Zero. And then they go to the football game, and then they, get so excited that the military jets fly over, and they say, "Oh, my taxes paid for that." No, you didn't pay anything. I'm paying. You, the viewer, are paying. You're not paying. And so I guess 0 times anything is still 0. But, I think what a lot of people are upset about when they're looking for places to go where they're treated best vis-a-vis taxation is they don't want to pay 1,000 times what the average person pays and then still be told they're a scumbag. I've spent the last number of years of my life removing all sorts of toxic people. I've had people who worked for me who were toxic. I've had friends who perhaps weren't toxic, but weren't the best friend. I've been weeding people out over the last 5 years. And I think, living overseas somewhat helps you do that, because you find out who your real friends are. But as the business has grown, as I've personally grown, I've been weeding that out. I don't want to go back to that. I don't want to go and live in a society where every headline I see, even from afar, is how a guy like me isn't paying my fair share. I was making less when I lived in the United States. My total tax burden, when you add it all up, not even living in a high tax state, I think was north of 40%. It was like 43% at the peak. And every year I'd go and see my accountant. I can remember, I'm like, "Hey, how much did I set aside for my quarterly estimate?" He's like, "Well, I think that, 40 cents on the dollar is a good place to start." And it was always like, "All right, maybe we'll top it up with a few bucks at the end." If I were to do it today, it would be even worse. And they want to make it even worse than it is now. And so I look at the situation and I say, if you want to live a happy life, what wasn't happy was being a small business owner and having to fill all these forms. And I'm a conscientious person. We say I'm the goody two-shoes of the offshore business. I like to play it straight. And when you play it straight in a country that has so many different forms and things and everything else, it's like you kind of worry, what if I'm making a mistake? And fortunately, I never did. But when I lived overseas, it's like you got to report every bank account. I got a lot of bank accounts. And I move money between them, and I get interest, and all kinds of things happen. It's like, I really want to do this properly, and I did, but it took so much time And we're like, what if I put one number wrong? And like, especially, like me personally, like they're, you know, it's just not a way to have happiness. And I just think that you want to live in a place where people are respectful of you. Now, what I don't agree with is you put Biden in office and suddenly it all falls apart. Certainly Biden wants to raise your taxes. It's not exactly like the United States was a tax haven for Americans living in the United States before. Certainly you see in the Pandora Papers, South Dakota plays prominently. Delaware's always played prominently. I mean, people use LLCs, things like that. So it can't be a tax haven for certain people. But if you live in the United States, the U.S. is far from a tax haven. I mean, Trump lowered your marginal rate from like 40 to 37%. Not exactly a drastic change of the kind we see in other countries. But, for me, feeling comfortable, feeling happy, feeling at peace. When I told my management team recently, that's our word, is peace. If something disturbs our peace, we're not going to deal with it. We're not going to be a profits at all cost company. If we're not going to bring someone into the company to make a few bucks, if it disturbs my peace or the company's peace or anyone else's peace, I just don't want to do it. At a certain point, you accomplish enough that you might say, well, listen, if you accomplish enough, why don't you pay taxes? Well, for all the aforementioned reasons. And again, I'm happy to pay. And as I get older and as I've spent all these years traveling around and start to send more of my team members to the Laoses and the Armenias and the Bolivias of the world, I expect that I will pay somewhat more. But, there's a difference between going to a country where they say, hey, come on in, we value you. Here's your bill to pay and we'll make it very easy on you, don't worry. Even if I'm paying a lot more than the average person, right? If you go to a country like a Switzerland or a UK or any of these like non-dom or lump sum countries, Italy, you're going to be paying a lot more to those regimes than the average person, but as a percentage of your income, it may be low. And the countries are actually welcoming you. For me, the idea, again, I don't necessarily believe that some of the stuff that you'll see in the Western media that, if you go to Istanbul, you have to get your head chopped off. I'm not saying I would live full-time in Istanbul, but I don't believe that. And I also, on the other hand, want to just enjoy life. And for me, living with the toxicity of many Western cultures where you're never paying enough, there's no incentive to bring people in, there's no thank you for paying 500 times what the average person paid. It's just greedy, money-grubbing behavior. I don't know how you can sit in that soup and feel great. Don't stop now. We've got well over 1,000 more videos here on YouTube for you to watch and learn how to go where you're treated best. And if you want to work with Nomad Capitalist personally, go to nomadcapitalist.com/apply, learn about our unique, tried and true process, garnered over years of experience, and learn how you can become our client.